Welcome to AgencyRise, the podcast where digital marketing agencies rise together. I'm your host, Chris Rudolph. I've spent the last decade coaching digital agency founders, helping them scale, systemize operations, and break free from the day-to-day grind. On this podcast, we'll talk about what really moves the needle for agencies: getting clients, building a team, creating systems, productivity, focus, and freedom. No hype here, no guru nonsense, just real conversations from the agency trenches. So today's guest is Matt Gattozzi, founder and CEO of Goodo Studios. Based in Seattle, Goodo Studios is a creative studio specializing in brand performance production for companies. Matt has generated over $100 million in revenue through the ads his team has produced, working with 8 and 9-figure companies such as Harry's, Kapari, Bloom, and Flamingo. So Matt, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, how's it going? Great to see you.
All right. For those who may not be familiar with you, tell us a little bit more about you and your agency.
Yeah, so we create content for consumer brands. And really our goal is to help them understand who's the customer, why are they buying, and then we actually go out and produce that content. And then, what makes us different is that we're shooting in person. So we're actually shooting real productions with real people, working with creators. So it's a busy time always. We're always producing a lot of content. But yeah, really excited to be here.
Awesome. And tell a little bit of the story of what you were doing prior to starting your agency. Like, what's your education or experience and background before
Yes.
you your agency?
Yeah. So before I started Goodo Studios, I was a professional ballet dancer. So I was training growing up. And then after high school, moved out to Seattle, was dancing here, then moved to Austin and danced as well professionally. And, I really enjoyed my time. Unfortunately, I had to stop my career early because of a back injury. But while I was always traveling and dancing, I always had a passion for photography and videos. So I was always making, really bad, ugly vlogs and just learning how to video edit. It's all on YouTube. I don't take anything down because I do cherish it, even though it is kind of cringy to watch. Uh,
Love
but
it.
very much like I just loved creating. I loved to just kind of express myself and capture what was around me. But when I was going through my injury, I was just like, well, the next thing I want to do is just get paid to use my camera. And that was really kind of the start of it. And so was working with freelancing with food trucks and events in Austin. And over time, I really fell in love with marketing and understanding advertising. And I felt like there was a huge disconnect between how people were strategizing about content and actually how to produce it. And so I think for me, why I started Goodo Studios was obviously I have massive ambitions to be creating ads on the biggest stage like the Super Bowl. But also it's because I felt like there was such a huge disconnect between how traditional production companies ran. They were so focused on what looked good and not really thinking about what does the client really need? What's the impact of their content? And so I've been able to really kind of, build a section in this world of advertising and marketing as somebody who really understands production, but how to layer that back up into business goals and things like that. And now my team is really focused on building the best content, whether that's high end stuff, lo-fi content, creator content for the best, companies in the world. And, I think that's a really exciting thing for what we're pursuing.
Man, your background's like so interesting. I know, like, in hearing the stories of many founders in this, like, very few went to school for this type of thing. I think now you probably can go to school for something like this, but I love, yeah, your background as a dancer and like passion for photography and just that passion. You just refine it over time and you try new things, you get interested, and then, yeah, and I just think of like I imagine with dancing, like the discipline and the attention to detail and mastering your craft. I'm guessing it had to play a big part of just how you approach things.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of lessons that I have taken from dance still applies to me running my business, marketing. So I when I take a time to train um, my employees or whatever, a lot of times I find myself saying, "Well, why do I have that standard, or where does that standard come from?" And it comes from dancing. So a lot of times I actually am trying to explain, "Hey, here's my experience with." What I think is the highest level of quality. And this is where it's coming from, right? So that they can understand, well, why is he insane? And it's because I spent so much time focusing in on the details when it came to dancing, right? I was 10, 12 years of training. So a very, very long time training Ballet is specifically the most technical of all dance forms. And I was training insane hours at such a young age. And so but for me, as I'm pursuing kind of this next part of my career in my life, I take that same approach, right? I'm looking at things from a decade long perspective of me becoming a master at my craft and what I'm doing. But also, it's about me really teaching a lot of those lessons and making sure that my team understands this is the quality that we're trying to put out, the standard that we were trying to put out first comes from me. And then it's like me pushed, right? And I think that's the biggest thing. And so I find that it's been very helpful to, as I'm teaching people, to really give them my insights of my experience. And I think that helps people really understand where I'm coming from and them to be able to take that and kind of run with it for themselves.
Nice. Well, tell us a little bit about like how Goodo Studio got started and how it evolved to kind of where it is today.
Yeah, I mean, as I said before, it really started with just me, right? And I was doing every single part of the, delivery, from coming up with the ideas to booking a location, getting talent, editing, looking at the data. So I've done every part of the role, and now it's just grown, right? So I just started hiring for first the things that I was probably the worst at, and then eventually kind of giving up each part of the delivery of the service itself. And ultimately, I think like as we were able to kind of get more clients, we had more reps, we were able to get better and better and really improve our service, improve our process, and just improve our overall performance for each of our clients. And I think like honestly, the biggest thing for a service business and an agency is just time in the market, right? Time playing the game. The more you can play the game and stay focused, just the more you can get better, right? Like just last year alone, we did 130 productions. If you're starting out going up against me, like we just have so much more experience of things going wrong, things going right, that we can just be that much stronger, this year, right? And so it's just like one of those things where you got to survive and just get better and iterate. And over time, like that's how you really compound. I think a lot of times people are trying to look for something like this quick, fast road up. But I think it's actually more important to build something that's sustainable, and that you're really learning and growing. Not to say you shouldn't grow quick, but you're growing people, right? That's what a service business is people. That is the product, and so that's just a little bit more complicated than making more widgets or making more software or making more products to sell. And so I think that's just something that I think a lot about as we've grown, but really it's just more reps over and over and really just establishing kind of our quality across each of those different parts of the service that we're providing.
Awesome. I love that. Kind of looking back over the years, like what have been some of the biggest drivers of your agency's?
Focus. I think a lot of times people want to expand, whether that's services or other lines of things, because they feel like, oh, I can make more money, or I want to be more full service. And we've been really deliberate on having focus. And I've passed up a lot of money not doing media buying, right? So we're just focused on creative. And I get this question all the time. Why don't you do media buying? Like you could maybe hold your class for even longer and all this stuff. Like, but the reality is that I want to be a best in class studio. And if I'm also doing email, I'm also doing media, I'm doing all these other things, then people don't really know what I'm for. So then when somebody asks, oh, who can make the ads? I don't become that suggestion because I'm kind of like this all or something. I don't stand for anything, right? But when people ask, hey, who can make my ads? They're like, oh, Goodo Studios. And the best part is that literally every single person in my organization is focused on creating best in class ads. They're not focused on anything else. So even though the producer is, looking to get talent and do all this stuff, she's doing that so that she can make the best ad. And she understands that that goes to make the best ad possible, right? So like every single person has a purpose. They're all on the work itself, and it's all layered into one thing. And so I think like again, we just get better and better because we just have that focus. Like if you were to ask me about like what should we do for media buying, I can give you some ideas. I think I can be very helpful, but ultimately like if we have just this one focus, like I can guarantee you that like our like performance for you will be very great. But also from an organization standpoint, it's not like, oh, we've got all of these different people and, different SOPs for all these things. It's like everything is just, it's just tunnel vision. And I think that a lot of times, especially with agencies, people want to grow the revenue, but they're not understanding like how if you add all these layers of services, like organizationally, that's very hard. Sales wise, it's very hard. Marketing is very hard. And so I think with just the focus of that, you can hire the right people, you build the right philosophy of how to do things. So just every facet of the business, like I think can succeed because of that focus. I just think it's scary to do it because you are saying no to a lot, right? You're saying no to potential. You're saying no to things that maybe you could get somebody to do and make it work. But I think the focus is where we've really been able to kind of build a name for ourselves.
Yeah, that reminds me of a mentor that told me this years ago, but like what you focus on grows. And he said that's like a universal principle. And I just see that as you describe, like how you approach dance, how you approach Godot Studios, how you align your team. Like what you focus on grows. And when you split your focus, that's where things can come off the rails, or it's difficult to really keep that type of quality. I'm curious, we obviously live in the age of AI, and like everything is accelerating so quickly. And, every week or even every day, there's new tools that are, coming with, that look really, really promising. How do you as an agency founder balance, utilizing those tools or those strategies with keeping your focus and not getting just pulled in every direction? I'd love to hear your take on that.
Yeah, well, you said our best, promising, but not all there, right? So I think like, the thing that's not talked enough about is discernment. And how do you have discernment for these tools? But also, what's the second order effect of adopting these tools in your organization? So the first thing is like, is your process even broken? Right? Like, I think a lot of times people are just trying to automate just for giggles. Like, oh, this was cool, but it's like, but does it need to be that, right? And like truly, like I think that a lot of times the problem with so many CEOs or just founders or whatever is like they're like, this is so cool. We could do this, this, and this, or oh, we could save this money if we do this, this, and this. But they're not the ones that are actually the end users, right? So they might bring it into the organization, but now you're creating so much chaos. You're having people jump out of certain workflows to use this tool because you said that to use it, but it's not actually working well, and it's just chaotic. And I think that like for me, I obviously need to have a pulse on what's going on, and I'm using these tools. I'm vetting them. I'm trying to understand how this can really work and how this can be really helpful. But I am also the biggest filter of like, does this actually go into the organization? Because like what I don't want to do is distract my team from executing. Because like as of right now, right, without any no more new tools, we're good. Like we are doing great, right? Like I don't need this to be anything faster, right? And so like if I'm just going to add a tool because I saw this cool demo on Twitter, like that actually might be hurting the work. Not to say that the tool can't be helpful in time, but like how you actually bring that into the organization is important. And so I think that like I've just been thinking so much more on how do I have discernment for the tools and things that I'm doing before I'm bringing that in. And honestly, like, but by the time this comes out, it's gonna change, right? Like, so I'm not gonna give like, oh, we're using this tool because it's probably gonna change by then. But what I can say is like building and understanding a filter, and that's going to be different for every organization. But like if you as a CEO can understand what that filter is for you and how do you test tools, how do you put things to, like and demoing with one or two clients before you roll it out, that's what you need to really be thinking about the most, more so than what's the latest tool. And so I'm trying to be a little bit more slower because I know things are changing so much. If by the time I'm putting a process in and then things get better or there's a new tool, it kind of like ruins everything. And so then I'm just jumping tool to tool to tool. And worst of all, I'm having my team change up everything and they're distracted.
Yeah, that's good. It's almost like what I hear you saying is like, can you evaluate these new tools or options? Like in your best estimation, after maybe exploring it, like, will this create a net positive or not?
Yeah. Or just like, could you ask your employees what they actually need help on? right? Like, I think that's like a huge thing, which is like, it's so easy to assume that these are the problems, these are the bottlenecks, but it's like, well, what are actually the bottlenecks? What are the things that need to get automated? I mean, not to say that things shouldn't be automated or improved, but I just think that a lot of times, we hear about how tools can improve things, but that's not always true, right? And so I think that we have to be more protective of that, and also just be speaking more directly to the people who are going to end up using it in your organization and say, is this actually a problem for you? Like, is this like actually painful for you? And would this actually help? And having those conversations before you are, just being like, okay, guys, latest tool this week, here you go. So I think that's a big thing that I'm thinking a lot about.
Yeah, that kind of reminds me of like I don't know if they call it the Toyota method of like really consulting like the people closest to the work and the problems, and then getting their feedback, but providing leadership. That always I've heard that come up over and over again in leadership books and things like that.
For sure. Yeah, I think that is very helpful. Obviously, you should do that for your marketing, but also doing that for yourself, I think it is key because again, they're the ones that are going to be using this in their day to day. And so you really want to make sure that you are, thinking about them and not giving them overwhelm or confusion. Because again, people are the product, right? Like, yes, I think there are still systems and automations that can be had, but you are scaling people and you want to make sure that those are there's a lot of clarity in the system. And so adding new tools or random things all the time can create a lack of clarity, which would really create a lack of excellence, in my opinion. And that's something that like you have to be extremely careful of.
Yeah, speaking of that, that standard of excellence. I know a lot of times in your story is very similar. Like you start solo and you add, you do great work. There's a high degree of excellence in what you do. You bring on contractors or employees and you grow over time. How do you maintain that level of excellence and quality as you scale up your agency? There's no possible physical way that you could be quality controlling all of the work.
Yeah. So this is something that I've been working on a lot in the last few months of just doing a lot more work on centralizing our philosophy of creative strategy, as well as kind of centralizing everything when it comes to quality control from an editing standpoint and things like that. And so I think the biggest risk whenever building an agency is, and most people start an agency because they themselves are like good at that type of work. Like I don't really find many agency people being like they started this and wasn't able to do the work because it's fairly hard to just like randomly get started unless you're like sitting on a pile of cash and you can like hire people right out the bat. But like most of the time you are the person. And so I think what ends up happening is at first you start to hire helpers, so people layering into you, but that does start to break over time if you cannot develop them into being owners of their work. So and I have felt that over time, like we were growing and growing really well, but everything was still layering into me in some fashion. And so really what it comes down to is you need to be a better teacher and a better coach, right? And making sure that you are giving the right playbooks, you are constantly like giving feedback. So you're not the one writing the script, but you get the script and you're teaching why that script isn't as strong as it should be. And here's the changes it can make. And like being the one to coach and teach and help them understand. So not just making, oh, I'm going to make the changes for you, or these are the changes you need to make, and then it's ready to go, but teach why are those things happening. And that just takes a long time to like get as more reps in with each of those people. But I also think there's a lot of documents and training and workflows that you can build out to kind of also share that. So what's our philosophy on advertising? How do you do creative strategy? Here's why. Recording those calls so people can go back. New hires can learn those things. Same with editing and things like that. And so I think it's just about extensive documentation, but not just like a 1 step, 2 step, 3 step, but also like, why are we doing this first step, and why do you need that to go into the next step, and like what's important. And then also like we have like checklists of like, hey, these are the things that we need to see in every edit, like make sure these are taken care of. And I think that like having those checklists are really important. Of course, in advertising, like every brand is going to be different. There's going to be, things that are going to break the rules. So, we don't build playbooks in the sense of like we rinse and repeat the work, but more so like everything should be like our process should be the same so that the 20% that is different it allows us to have space to be come up with the most interesting ideas, be creative and do all that stuff. And so I think just within that process, you got to teach it. And I think ultimately at the end of the day, it's about discipline, and discipline is not even goes beyond the checklist. It's about making sure that people like embody that checklist, embody what is excellence and understand that. And I think that's just a matter of like them being in the organization over time and passing that along to each person of, hey, this is why that's not gonna, cut it. And here's why. And so that they can learn from their next rep. And then it's just giving people reps and making sure that you're a really great coach.
That's good. That's good. So Matt, when you have your philosophy documented and you're coaching your team to instill that level of ownership and like the quality that and the excellence that you're looking for. When it comes to hiring, what's one piece of advice that you'd have for all the founders out there?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think like the best advice is that you're gonna make a mistake. And I think that like that's actually okay. I think hiring is extremely hard. You're not gonna get it right all the time. And so I think that like so often some people try to perfect the hiring process that they don't even take action on it, or they just really like, yeah, they're just dragging their feet and then they really miss it. And I think like the more you hire, or like the faster you can hire, the more you can really learn what makes a good hire and what doesn't make a good hire for you, right? And I think that's where it's so hard is there's so many books out there about hiring. There's a lot of, I mean, there's podcasts and all this stuff, right? And it's just like, man, like at the end of the day, some things are just like you kind of have to go through it. And so I don't know if I can be like, hey, these are the questions you should ask. Like, I think, again, it just depends. Like, your culture is going to be different than my culture. What I want to do in terms of my workplace is going to be very different than your workplace, right? So, like, ultimately, those things I think are going to be more bespoke. But I think, like, just knowing going in that there's going to be mistakes, it's like you should just take action, go with your gut, and then, like, learn. You're going to refine it. Like, you're going to get better. You yourself are going to have those reps, right? Like, you're going to start to catch those things, but, like, you're never gonna be able to like catch what's a good hire versus a bad hire until you like actually do it, right? And like you just got to give yourself grace on things not working out because you're just not going to be perfect. But I find that like you helped me with some of my first hires, right? And it was like, wow, once I did get the hire, like there was just so much more clarity over time. And like that to me was like, I always was like wishing like I wish I just hired sooner, right? Because I would learn how to get better at it. I would learn how to be a better manager, all of those things. And so it's just like delaying that kind of sucks because out of perfection. And you're just never going to get it right all the time.
Yeah, that's good. I see that literally like with so many in the agency world, like you just got to get started and you make mistakes, you learn. It's kind of like even it's similar to like filtering clients that are a good fit. At the beginning, you're
Yep.
taking on kind of anyone you learn, you're like, okay, I like that. I definitely will never. If I see that again, that's a red flag. I won't do it again. And you can really refine that over time. Seems very similar type of process to what you're saying, hiring, just like get out there and do it. And it will shed light on, I know for myself, it sheds light on my own deficiencies or the things that I need to shore up in how I'm leading or or my hiring process. And yeah, kind of just comes with that continual like refinement.
Yeah, because like, okay, all the things we just talked about, right? About like how do you build out the philosophy of your agency and do all that stuff. I think it's like, man, I think some people maybe even spend more time doing that before their first hire, right? And it's like at a certain point, you kind of have to hire so you can learn how to coach, right? And like learn how to teach, and also like what information do they really need? Right? What do they come with? What do they need? And so I think that changes also too then like over time as you grow your agency, the goal is you'll have more capital hopefully to also get better talent like from the jump, right? So more expensive talent. and they're going to come with their own things. Experience is good, but sometimes not. And like, what does that look like? So there's always so many different dynamics that get involved as you start to grow the organization and the types of people you're hiring. So like ultimately you can't get better at leading a team until you're really starting to hire. And so I think there's not like a perfect thing, but I feel like most of the time I have found that if you are hesitant on hiring, like probably you should have hired already. And then two is like, if you're worried about, oh, is this going to work out? How's this going to work? It's like, man, like you're never going to be able to get out of anything if you don't do it. Like it's going to have to happen eventually, right? Like you just got to do it unless you're trying to be a solo person, which is like, if that's what you're trying to do, like that's totally fine. But if you're like, I'm trying to grow this thing, it's like you need to be not aggressive on hiring, but you definitely need to kind of like put the gas on hiring. Like that should be a focus. Like that should be in your mind of like, okay, who am I going to hire first? Where am I going to go with this? And like be thinking about it. And I think now where I've tried to get better at is knowing the triggers of when to hire what role. Hey, when we get this capacity, we need to go out and hire this. This is what we need to do. And you just start developing all of those things. But it's like you got to go and get your reps in, and you're just not going to be able to do that if you're just going to like stick to yourself.
Yeah, I think a lot of times, founder it's hard to like at the very first hire, especially the first couple, like giving away control, uncertainty. There's a lot of emotion, financial risk involved, and you can be very very hesitant. And then if anything goes bad, like a lot of times people are ready to abort the whole process, and because it's just in their minds it's easier. It was easier just doing it themselves. But yeah, you have to take that kind of thinking of where is that going to lead to down the road if you want to grow and you want to be more than a solo person.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, as I said, like you definitely saw me in my first like hires, and it was like, it is hard, but like also once we did it once, it was like, okay, we got to keep going, right? And like you just get like not like a bug to do it, but I think once you get to the other side, you're like, oh man, you got to just keep going. Like I think I've never met somebody who was like, oh man, I wish I didn't hire like whatever. Like I've never met that person truly. Like maybe there's certain situations like you shouldn't have hired something, but like for the most part, I'm like most of the time you needed to hire somebody probably sooner than you think.
Yeah, it's very similar. Back in the day, I used to do like corrective exercise and rehab, and you'd have that person that waited to have their knee replaced, for like years, and they were just in pain. And they're like, oh, I can, they were so used to the pain that they just continue to do it. And then when they actually have the knee replacement, they're like, oh my gosh, like why did I wait so long? Like it's so
Yeah.
much better. And I think that's very synonymous to hiring for sure.
Yeah.
Um, Matt, I'd be curious, like, what has been really effective for you as far as acquiring new clients?
So I think going back to focus, because we are focused, my content is also focused, right? So when I'm talking about advertising, when I'm talking about production, I'm just talking about that, right? And I think that really helps. If I was also trying to like be like, and this is what you should do for your email flow and like all this stuff, people are like, what is this guy selling? I'm not even sure, right? I think just having focus is so important from a service level because then that helps with your marketing of that, right? I think like I am naturally inclined when it comes to creating content. I mean, that's our business, right? So I feel like I should at the very least be decently good at that. And so a lot of the flywheel is personal branding, right? So LinkedIn, Twitter, newsletter, got a podcast, and just like kind of just humming on those. Definitely the goal this year is to expand beyond me. But I think like, look, you can build a great business on founder content alone. I think like that has obviously been very, very helpful building a POV in the space and letting people really understand like what's our philosophy. And that I think can attract people to I want this type of work done and Matthew and team can do that. I think like the biggest thing that I'm thinking a lot more now on is, how do we one make the founder content sustainable? How do I stay consistent? Things like that. And then two, how do we grow from here, right? How do we go beyond just me, right? How do we make it about Goodo and making sure that the institution itself is building, the brand and how people kind of see us and view us and go to us So those are things that I'm like really thinking about. But I think ultimately it's going to come down to content. Like that's if that's what brands are doing. Like I think every company should be doing that, whether they're SaaS, service, agency, doesn't matter. Like it all comes down to content. The format and everything, I think you can kind of pick to what's your skill and what you feel most comfortable to start. But ultimately, like content is everything. That's just how you're going to get to people. A lot of times, people will book a call, but they've been looking at the content for a few years, right? And so it's like they're going to close a lot stronger because they're already so used to getting into my sphere of content. So yeah, now I think next steps is just how do we continue to build top of funnel, like true top of funnel to bring them into kind of more of the middle and bottom of funnel content that I kind of produce right now. And I think that's going to be next step.
On the flip side of growth, like what have been some of the most painful lessons that you had to learn the hard way in your
Mm.
time with
Plen
Godot?
Yeah, plenty of hard moments. I think like, a lot of times it feels hard because your job as a CEO is to fix problems. So, I think the biggest thing is just knowing your numbers and cash flow, right? So I think that's like really important. So having a really tight accounts receivable, like, just reporting on those things. For us specifically, because we are doing production, there's just such an additional like layer of cost outside of just payroll. So we're not just payroll plus a little bit of SaaS. It's renting, talent, creators. I mean, it's so much additional costs that go into our service and as well as just coordinating of money. And so cash flow is extremely tough to manage in the production business. And so I think when you're a few clients, you can do some pretty good back of the, napkin math on things, and you can kind of brute force it. But when you're getting to a lot of clients and we're talking like, big months and, big run rates, that's a lot of payroll. That's a lot of creators. There's a lot of money just kind of going in and out. And you got to know all of that. And so I think just getting tighter on those things and understanding that I'm an artist at the end of the day, right? But like understanding that the money and the finance and the spreadsheets, they fuel your ability to do that art for me, right? And so that's how I've been able to kind of almost maybe psych myself out into like wanting to like learn about financing and stuff like that is because, man, I get to do that so that I can do the other stuff that I really want to do. And I don't get to have the cool productions. I don't get to have a team to help me if I'm not dialed in there. Of course, over time, I'll definitely hire like a controller or CFO. But I think in this moment, it's important for me to understand how those numbers work. And even if I do hire those things out, I always need to respect the spreadsheets and respect the numbers, even though it's just not the thing that I'm like, I love doing this, but it's what's most important.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we're going to enter the rapid fire round. I'm going to rapid fire some questions for you, and whatever comes to mind, you can blurt it out. So, what's one tool or piece of software that makes you more effective?
I mean, I feel like you gotta say Claude, but specifically the desktop app has the co-work, and so you can do these like really long, multiple step things, and that's just been huge. So I've been really using Claude, and you can use these connectors connect to your Slack, to your email, so you can just pull in. Here's the call recording, send a follow up email. Amazing. So like Claude connected to your Fireflies, your Gmail, your Slack. I mean, there's nothing more. I'm on inbox zero. I'm on Slack inbox zero. I'm like crushing it the last few weeks because of it. So, yeah, big Claude fan here.
I love it. What's one habit that you swear by? It could be personal or business related.
Habit I swear by. I know that some people aren't morning people, and I'm okay with that. So I think the habit for me is getting up early and like having that. But I think really the core of it, even if you're not a morning person, is having some true dedicated time for yourself. So even if you are a night type person, that's fine. Like at night, like whatever it is, you need to have some sort of pocket of time where you're just locked in and no distractions. For me, that's early mornings, right? I've got son I've got to, help, my wife, all this stuff. So there's a lot of things that happen in the morning. And so I'm waking up even earlier than I usually have in the past. I was always a morning person, but now even earlier, so I can always have some protected time. Like I know that I'm not getting hit up at, 4:30 in the morning. So that's where I live. And I think it's important. If you're on Pacific time, you kind of have to be a morning person. Like that's the hot take. If you're on Pacific time, it's the worst. It is the worst time zone, but you got to be a morning person on Pacific time, or else you're just way behind, in my opinion.
And what's one book or mentor that has really impacted you?
Ooh, I think people come and go for different reasons at different stages, but the person that I think I'm really liking right now is a guy named Ryan Deiss, Deiss. I think he runs Scalable Company. I'm actually going through kind of their program right now. I think that like he's got a really great kind of philosophy on growing a business, especially if you've kind of crossed over that seven-figure range. I think, you really want to figure out how do you scale your organization. I think he's got some really good stuff. Great YouTube channel, great TikToks. I think he actually has written a book. I have not actually read it. But he's a guy that I'm liking so far, like right now in the last like 4 to 5 months, that I would definitely recommend checking out.
Nice. And what's one piece of advice you'd give agency founders listening right now?
Just, I think that, going back to the whole AI thing, I think people are really focused on like the automation of things, but just remember, what do your clients really need, right? Like we are in the service business. We serve them, not ourselves. And so we need to really be thinking about what's the impact, right? Like, do we really need to automate and make 1,000 ads if they're really only running 30 right now? Probably not, right? Like, we probably should just make those 30 ads really great. And like, if you can help yourself make those a little bit faster, a little bit better, like awesome. But like focus first on understanding what does your client and clients really need, and making sure that you're servicing that first and foremost before you're trying to do all the flashy, cool automations and all this other stuff. And I think the service part has kind of gotten lost in the sauce with a lot of noise. And we are, in my opinion, we're the hospitality business, right? And so we got to be hospitable and serving the people that have signed up for our service, right? And are paying a lot of money and trusting us with that. And we shouldn't be taking that lightly. And so, I think just focusing there first before you're trying to change everything and like make the coolest, automation for your Twitter, focus on your clients, because everything else will layer in from there. If you're not even doing great work, it honestly doesn't matter anything else, right? So you got
Yeah.
to start there first.
Yeah, that's like the fundamental, like the getting the result, getting the result of what the client needs is foundational. I love that you said that. Where is the best place online to learn about you and Goodo Studios?
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter, LinkedIn, just my name, Matthew Gattozzi. And, I'm on TikTok, I'm on Instagram, all the same kind of handle. We keep it nice and tight. And then, yeah, I've got a newsletter, I've got a bunch of stuff, but you'll find it all on the internets as you search my name and whatnot. And yeah, we're putting out some of the best work that we can. We're also always looking to work with other agencies who don't have creative production in their capabilities. So always down to chat with people who need help, or who have clients that always need help, and building out those partnerships as well. So thanks for having me on. You were a big part of where I am today from our work just a few years ago. And so a lot of the kind of things that I've taken from our work together continue to kind of expand on and kind of build out. But you kind of helped lay that foundation for some of those first few hires, and getting me moving and grooving. So I always got to, pay my respects to Mr. Chris.
Oh man, my pleasure, Matt. Yeah, and I know those of you listening probably could see this as he was telling this story, but he's committed to mastery and excellence, and I know everyone listening got so much out of today's episode. So thanks so much for sharing all the gold nuggets and just raw insights. Super helpful.
Yeah. Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, and for everyone tuning in at the gym, in your car, or at your desk, thanks for joining us. And if this episode was helpful for you, be sure to subscribe and share it with another agency founder who you think would benefit from it. Because agencies don't rise alone, they rise together. This is Agency Rise.